Well, it was a beautiful morning today, and in this dark time of year, a chance to get out on an extended walk with Hayes just cannot be passed up on. I was 6 or 7 years old when my family first got television. And the honest truth is, I've always attributed that breakthrough in our household to President Kennedy. Because when President Kennedy said, "We're going to put a man on the moon in this decade," that caught my dad's attention. And of course, Dad's a pretty conservative guy, so he didn't buy into it right away. But a few years later, it became apparent that, you know, if they weren't actually going to succeed, they were certainly going to make a history-making attempt. So we got a television. And with that television, we got 2 1/2 channels. I call the half channel a city over the mountains. If the clouds were right, we could catch that one. In another BC city across the water, we could get, 80%-ish good almost all the time, and in certain weather conditions, pretty good. But the best signal we got was out of Bellingham, Washington. And really, if we hadn't got that signal, I'm not sure we would have got the TV either, because that's where Walter Cronkite was, for me. And Walter Cronkite and the Apollo program were the only things my dad considered important enough to allow the medium, which he remained suspicious of right up till the day he died, of television, into his house. And that was pretty formative for me. I got to be honest, whether people laugh or not, the 10-year-old me really would have thought that if I was shooting a video like this at 60 years old, it wouldn't be from the planet Earth. But such is the insane optimism of childhood, I guess. Anyway, that's not what I came to talk about. The imagery on Walter Cronkite wasn't only dominated by the Apollo program, as great as that was. The imagery was also dominated by the war in Vietnam, America's war in Vietnam, and the civil unrest at home with the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and the peace movement that ran through the universities and academia. And it produced scenes that, if you watch them without sound, look a lot like what I'm seeing on virtually every news channel this morning in Washington, D.C. There's differences, though, in what people were riled up about. I guess a lot of the people marching today might not remember that the U.S. of A. did not always have, 100% voluntary professional military. I mean, that is something to be quite proud of in the current day. But back at that time, America had the draft. And that was a big part of what stirred people up, the idea that young people could be forced into military service, whether that was, in their direction of travel or not, and packaged off and sent off to a foreign jungle to die for things that even to this day are unarguably questionable. And I get that the people that were a part of sending all those young men and women off to die really do need to believe that it was all worth something. And I'm not here to argue about that either way. The civil rights movement itself, it in some ways was tied to the draft too, because oddly enough, the entirely random number draw of the draft, I think it might be the only supposedly random draw that selectively seem to come up with, you know, higher and higher numbers of non-white people. So it was the peace movement through the draft was tied to the civil rights movement. And that coalition, which now I'm all of a sudden hearing people referring to it as the Troubles. The reason I don't like that name is because those are pretty valid movements. And here's the thing. Long-term societal benefits came out of the Troubles in the 60s. Right? The Vietnam War ended. The draft ended. And civil rights across the continent improved 100-fold. I really don't think that there's any chance at all that history's going to write any great goods coming out of these current troubles. And I started out when I was thinking about what I wanted to say in this video, thinking that really these current troubles are trying to undo the unarguable, wondrous gains of the previous troubles. But I realize that's not true at all. That's not the focus at all. It's much worse than that, in my opinion. What it appears to me, whether anybody's saying it out loud or not, and certainly the posturing speaks loud enough, whether they don't quite have the confidence to say it in words yet. But these troubles are not trying to roll back the gains of the 60s. These troubles are trying to roll back the gains of the American Civil War. I don't need anybody to take my word for it. Keep that thought in mind while you're watching the news, watching the posturing, watching the language. Unarguably, clever people are keeping a very close leash on the mulls of their less gifted brethren. So they're avoiding saying it out loud. But that's really what it's all about. That's what this lunatic fringe is really after. They want to refight the American Civil War. Most people are a lot younger than me and don't remember, you know, why the peace movement was what it was. I don't know, it's like we don't actually have, you know, a big enough national issue to draw people together in positive ways, like the peace movement or the civil rights movement. And instead we have something that looks the same if you turn the sound off. But it's not anything close to being the same. And those of us that can see it need to wake up and stand up and speak up. Because we are on a knife's edge here. Not just the United States of America, all of us. All of us can suffer a massive setback if the people behind this aren't brought back into the fold somehow, or at least prohibited from promoting their agenda. I'm going to propose that the vast majority of the American public is sane enough not to think that civil war would be a desirable thing regardless of what you're upset about. But those people that are driving that seem to be able to draw the rest of you in to taking actions that are probably quite a bit beyond what you would have intentionally taken on your own. And for those of the rest of the American populace that's sitting back and watching, maybe we don't all get to watch. If we want this to end in a way different than things like this have ended historically, there's no imperative clock of doom saying that the actions that have been set into play have to be allowed to come to fruition. You know, a lot of the leadership have been arrested. That's a good start. But some of it has to come down to individual sane people. You know, we don't have to sit there quietly while some lunatic rants, you know, these crazy things. If you sit there silently, they think you're agreeing with them. And it's a stressful situation for almost everybody because these people are violent in their posturing at least, if not violent by nature. But if we want to see the USA survive this has to stop. Make America great again. Pre-Civil War America was not great. Just saying.